Hi everyone, welcome to We Learn Legal. If you're watching this video, please make a note that this video is a part of the video series or the playlist series that we have for the legal reasoning, wherein हम सारे legal reasoning को CLAT exam के लिए एक पूरे comprehensive manner में scratch से cover कर रहे हैं, covering all your doubts. So if you're watching this for the first time, do make sure कि आपने इसके पहले की videos को cover किया है. Link आपको नीचे मिल जाएगा पूरी playlist का. And if not, if you're coming in continuity, then start watching this video.
Hello, Bachcho, and welcome to We Learn Legal. So, in today's class, we'll be reading about the strict and absolute liability, जो बहुत ही important concepts हैं for the law of torts, and especially here a special mention goes कि CLAT के जो previous year questions हैं, उनमें एक direct question आया हुआ है from strict and absolute liability. So, please understand this very, very carefully, and we'll understand that what exactly is strict and absolute liability, और इनमें difference भी क्या होता है, ये हम आज सीखेंगे. To begin with, let me first hope that you understand by now that what exactly do we mean by liability. हमने पहले की भी classes में इसको cover किया है. Liability simply, again I'm repeating, is the accountability of a person or the answerability of a person for the wrong that he has committed. Okay? So for any kind of wrong that this person has committed, so उसको जो भी उसके लिए compensation देना पड़े, उसके लिए जो भी उसको भरपाई करनी पड़े, that will be his liability. Okay? In some situations, a person can have strict liability, right? कि वो strictly liable होगा. But in more serious cases, a person can also have absolute liability. So we'll read about it in today's class. So firstly, to begin with strict liability, this came in the case of Rylance versus Fletcher. So जो मैं PYQ की बात कर रही हूँ उसमें exactly इसी case का mention भी है. So it's very, very important. Okay. So the concept of strict liability came in this very famous case that was called as Rylance versus Fletcher. ये बाहर का case है, India का case नहीं है, okay? So what does it say? Any person who keeps hazardous substances on his premises will be held responsible if such circumstances escape the premises and cause any damage to any other person or his property or premises. So पहली important चीज है that a person keeps any substance that is hazardous in nature. ठीक है, hazardous किसको कहते हैं बच्चों? जो dangerous होता है. ठीक है, दूसरी चीज क्या कह रहे हैं कि उसके प्रेमाइसेस से अगर वो चीज एस्केप हो गई तो सेकंड इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग इज दैट दिस हैजार्डस थिंग शुड एस्केप. व्हाट नेक्स्ट इज इट सेइंग? दैट द पर्सन फ्रॉम whose property such substance has escaped will be held liable and or accountable even when he hasn't been negligent in keeping the substance in his premises. So it doesn't matter that आपने बहुत ध्यान रखा था, आपकी कोई गलती नहीं थी, आपकी कोई negligence नहीं थी. No, it doesn't matter. If you kept something hazardous in your premise and that thing escaped and caused harm to somebody else, then you will be held accountable and answerable for this loss. And it says that the liability is imposed on him not because there is any negligence on his part, because wo to ho ya na bhi ho doesn't matter, but the substance kept on his premises is hazardous and dangerous, and thus अगर आपको इतने hazardous और dangerous substance में deal करना है तो उसके साथ जो risk है वो भी आपको उठाना पड़ेगा. So let's go and understand that what exactly happened in the Rylance versus Fletcher case. Then you will be able to understand the concept of strict liability in a clearer manner. So what happened that Rylance and Fletcher, there were two people, okay? So these are the names of two people, okay? So Rylance and Fletcher had their grounds, basically they had their lands adjacent to each other, but Rylance जो था, इसका जो land था वो थोड़ा height पे था, और फ्लेचर का जो लैंड था वो थोड़ा बस यहाँ तक था. ठीक है, इसकी हाइट थोड़ा कम थी, तो बेसिकली ऐसे ढाल थी जिसको हम ढाल कहते हैं. ठीक है, सो व्हाट हैपेंड that this Rylance, this person Rylance, he actually started using his land for the purpose of making it as a water reservoir. Reservoir आप समझते हो कि देखो इसको यहाँ पे वो he could have used for anything. He could have used for growing any plants, any vegetables, anything. But what he did, he dug a deep hole and started using this land as a big water reservoir. यहाँ पे water को बांध की तरह उसको रोक के रखना इसने शुरू कर दिया. ठीक है. Now one unfortunate day what happens that this gets overflowed and the water from his reservoir goes and flows deep down into these mines which belonged to Fletcher. ठीक है, तो अब क्या हुआ? Of course जब पानी यहाँ आएगा तो पानी उसकी सारी माइंस में भर गया, right? अब of course जब पानी भर गया, now these mines were of no use anymore. Now in this situation, here he was not making a natural use of his land. This was supposed to be for any agricultural work, any horticulture work, but what he did, he made a reservoir out of it. Now of course this nature of water becomes hazardous. So water naturally is not hazardous, right? But huge amounts of water become hazardous, right? So in this case water escaped. So पहला जो element था of something being hazardous, that has been met because he was keeping so much of water on his land. Now the second element, that this thing should escape. So this also happened. And third thing, that harm was caused, and also there was non-natural use of the land. So this is an ideal case of strict liability. So you can see over here also, when we talk about the essentials of strict liability, first thing that is very, very important is that the dangerous substance should be there, right? Second, this substance should escape. And thirdly, जहां से वो escape किया था, that area should have been used for any non-natural use, just in the case of Rylance versus Fletcher, जिसकी वजह से आप उसके danger की जो degree है उसको increase कर रहे हो, because that land was not supposed to be meant to be made a reservoir, but still he went ahead and did it. So अगर ये तीन essentials match होते हैं, so यहाँ पे this person, like let's take an example of Rylance in this case, he will be strictly liable for the loss that was caused to whom? To Fletcher. Okay, so this is a very common matter of the strict liability. लेकिन अगर हम कंपेयर करने निकले strict liability को absolute liability से, so we can say that strict liability still has some kind of relief. Now why am I saying this? Because strict liability has some kinds of exceptions. Okay, this is very, very important. It means कि yes, we are saying that if A was keeping a hazardous substance, if the substance escaped and he was making non-natural use and harm was caused, right? These are the essentials. We are saying that if this happens, there will be strict liability. Yes, nobody is denying that, okay? But in this case, अगर इनमें से कुछ भी, या ये जो escape था या ये harm था, it happened because of any of these reasons, then this person A can use it as a defense and he can save himself from the strict liability by using these exceptions. Okay. So firstly, it is plaintiff's fault. By plaintiff's fault, we mean plaintiff बच्चों वो होता है जो कोर्ट में complaint. So it is actually taken from this word complaint, or basically who files the suit, who is asking for compensation. So Rylance versus Fletcher में Fletcher would be the plaintiff because उसका नुकसान हुआ, he is the victim. Okay, so plaintiff's fault अगर है, इसका मतलब अगर कहीं ना कहीं there was something that was done wrong by Fletcher also. We'll cover it into detail in the classes. Okay, so here Fletcher ने अगर कोई गलती खुद भी करी थी तो the plaintiff is also at fault, and thus जो डिफेंडेंट है यानी जो डिफेंड कर रहा है खुद को, इस केस में कौन है? Rylance. So he can escape his liability. Okay. Secondly, if there was involvement of any act of God, which means कि this water, let's take an example, this water did not escape because of any other reason, but here there was a major earthquake. Now, if this was done as a natural thing and it was beyond anybody's control, then in this situation, it can be taken as an exception. Thirdly, if this was an act of third party, so neither it was fault of A nor it was fault of B, ना Rylance की गलती थी ना Fletcher की गलती थी, किसी और थर्ड पर्सन ने आके कोई प्रॉब्लम कॉज करी, तो उस केस में भी आप ये एक्सेप्शन ले सकते हो. बट प्लीज रिमेंबर, this is only and only in the cases of strict liability. We're going to read about absolute liability right after this. Okay. And fourthly is consent of the plaintiff. So इसमें let's say कि फ्लेचर ने ही अपनी ये कंसेंट दी होती कि कोई बात नहीं, आप पानी छोड़ दो, कुछ नहीं होता, आई लुक फॉरवर्ड टू इट, मैं देख लूंगी, मतलब मैं देख लूंगा, एज इन आई विल टेक केयर ऑफ इट, जो भी रहेगा जैसे भी रहेगा. सो ही हिमसेल्फ गेव द कंसेंट. सो कंसेंट देने के बाद उल्टा चोर कोतवाल को नहीं डांट सकता है, सिंपल एज दैट. ओके, सो दिस इज वेरी important for you to know that these four exceptions are available, but only and only in the cases of strict liability. Because when we talk about the absolute liability, this is given in the most severe cases. Okay, so this is important for you to note that now, because the cases are so severe, the liability given on the harm causer is absolute in nature. And when we talk about absolute nature of liability, it is simply, the formula is when we talked about the rule of strict liability, and if we subtract, we minus the exceptions from it. Can you see the minus? We minus the exceptions from it, we get absolute liability. So everything same as a strict liability, लेकिन कोई भी exception यहाँ पे available नहीं है, आपको अपनी liability fulfill करनी पड़ेगी. And just like how strict liability came in the case of Rylance versus Fletcher, the absolute liability in India came in the case of MC Mehta versus Union of India, and which was primarily based on the this area where there was this gas tragedy in Bhopal. You all must have heard about 1980s ki baat hai. So because it was such a huge tragedy, so here these people who were responsible cannot escape by giving any kind of exception, and they will have to be responsible, and thus they are absolutely liable. Okay, so you can see like here you can see a few cases, like for example ammonia gas leak at Tamil Nadu unit. So these are Bhopal gas tragedy at 39, then over 25 hospitalized after ammonia gas leak. So you can see that there are many situations where these things happen, and depending upon the severity, it is now then determined by the courts whether or not they'll be made strictly liable or absolutely liable. Okay, so this was for all for today's class, and I hope that you now have clarity about strict and absolute liability. So thank you so much everyone, and all the best.
So I hope that you liked the video and आपके जो भी concepts थे वो clear हो गए हैं. If you have any doubts regarding this topic, then you can join me in the WhatsApp group. The link is there in the description box below. मैं खुद personally सारे doubts को clear करती हूँ, so you can get in touch with me through this WhatsApp group. To watch another video of the same series, you can just click on the end card, or simply you can find it right below this video. Good luck, aspirants.